In the summer of 2015, my friends and I went on a trip to a haunted hotel known for its ghost stories. We booked a room and arrived excited and a bit nervous. That first night, we decided to explore the hotel after dark. As we wandered through the empty hallways, we heard whispers echoing through the air. It felt like someone was watching us. We found an old piano in one of the common rooms and couldn't resist playing a few notes. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, and we heard a chilling laugh behind us. We spun around, but no one was there. Frightened, we hurried back to our room. Just as we were about to fall asleep, we heard loud banging coming from the hallway. It continued for what felt like an eternity. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and peeked out the door. What I saw sent chills down my spine. A figure in white standing at the end of the hallway, staring right at me. I quickly closed the door and bolted the lock. We all huddled together, scared and unsure of what to do. In the morning, we asked the staff if they had heard anything strange during the night. They laughed it off, saying the hotel was known for its quirks. We left the hotel feeling relieved but curious about what we had experienced. My sister used to stay over at a friend's house for sleepovers, and she told me a story about one particular night. They were having a great time, but as the night wore on, they all started to feel a little uneasy. After they turned the lights out, my sister felt something cold brush against her arm. She dismissed it as her imagination, but it happened again. She turned to her friend and whispered about what she felt, and her friend looked terrified. Then they heard a loud bang from the living room. They exchanged glances, and without saying a word, they crept toward the sound. As they reached the doorway, they saw a shadow dart across the room. My sister grabbed her friend's arm, and they both jumped back, scared out of their minds. Instead of running away, they decided to confront whatever was in the living room. They took a deep breath and stepped inside, but everything was still. They didn't see anything, and the shadows seemed to retreat into the corners of the room. Deciding they had enough excitement for one night, they returned to the safety of the bedroom, where they stayed up late, talking about what had happened. The next day, they laughed it off, but my sister still wonders what might have been lurking in that house that night. During a family camping trip a few years ago, we decided to pitch our tents at a remote site near a forest. The first night, everything went smoothly. We told ghost stories by the fire, laughing and enjoying the night. However, on the second night, I woke up to strange noises outside my tent. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but the sounds grew louder, and I realized they were coming closer. I felt my heart race. I nudged my brother, who was sleeping next to me, but he didn't wake up. I carefully unzipped the tent to peek outside. What I saw left me speechless. A tall, dark figure standing at the edge of the clearing, barely illuminated by the moonlight. It seemed to be watching us. Terrified, I quickly zipped the tent back up and shook my brother awake. When I told him what I saw, he rolled his eyes and told me to go back to sleep. But I couldn't. The figure remained at the edge of the clearing, unmoving. Finally, dawn broke and we emerged from the tent. I hesitantly asked my family if they had seen anything unusual during the night, but they all shrugged it off. To this day, I wonder what I saw that night, and whether it was just a figment of my imagination or something more sinister. I used to work at an old grocery store from 2015 to 2017. While it wasn't exactly scary, it was unsettling. I often saw shadows or figures out of the corner of my eye while sweeping the aisles or cleaning the meat department. Odd things would happen, like boxes falling off the shelves for no reason. Once, a box of rice tipped over, despite having enough space to fall without hitting anything. I often felt watched, especially during solo night shifts, when I could hear voices when no one was there. Other employees reported similar experiences, like hearing footsteps on the stairs leading to the break room when no one was around. One night, I witnessed a mop handle stand upright on its own for a few seconds before readjusting itself. Equipment would move on its own, and we sometimes saw figures peering through the windows, even when no one else was outside. One of my colleagues asked me if I was playing a prank when he heard footsteps behind him while he was cleaning. The next night was filled with strange activity, including a footprint that didn't match any of our shoes, leading to a mess we had cleaned up earlier. When I was in high school, I was good friends with a girl named Emma. Emma was kind of quiet and shy, but was always there if you needed her. After I finished high school, I lost touch with Emma, as often happens with friendships after school. 2 years later in college, I started dating a girl named Sarah, and Sarah's best friend, Gary, was Emma's boyfriend. After discovering we all knew each other, we started to hang out again. One of the nights we planned to hang out at Gary's house, have a few drinks, and play some games. Sarah and I showed up at about 8 p.m., and Gary said Emma should be over soon. That was fine. We opened our beers and started drinking. It was nearly 9 p.m., and Emma still hadn't arrived, so we decided to call her. Emma answered and apologized for being late. She said she was just finishing getting ready and would be there soon. At 9:30 p.m., there was still no sign of Emma, so we called again. This time, her younger brother picked up the phone. He was 15 years old at the time and told us Emma wasn't feeling well and that she was in the bathroom. Gary was worried and asked if he could check on her, but her brother insisted he was looking after Emma and she was fine, telling us to enjoy our night. We didn't go home. Instead, we kept drinking and hanging out because we thought Emma just had the flu. Just after 10 p.m., we decided to call one last time to check on Emma again. Her brother calmly told us Emma had gone to bed and that she would call us in the morning. We left it at that, believing she was safe at home in bed, and didn't want to annoy her brother by calling too often. That night, Emma's mother returned home at midnight to find Emma dead on the kitchen floor. Emma had been bludgeoned to death by her younger brother a couple of hours earlier. We later found out that when Emma was leaving to come to us, she and her brother got into a fight over something ridiculous, and he beat her with a baseball bat. He then proceeded to stab her over 51 times. Since her brother was a minor, he wasn't sent to prison. Instead, he pleaded insanity and was sent to an institution. A lot of this information was kept quiet as he was a minor. I do know that his parents stuck by him, and he was released after 4 years. My wife and I went to a cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway, hoping for some peace and quiet. We arrived late Friday evening, and as we settled in, I noticed the atmosphere felt a bit off. The cabin, though cozy, had an eerie aura that seemed to hang in the air. The first night passed without incident, but on Saturday, while my wife was preparing dinner, I decided to explore the area around the cabin. The woods were dense and dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. After a while, I came across an old weathered tree with strange markings on it. Curious, I traced my fingers over the carvings, feeling a chill run down my spine. Later that evening, as we sat by the fireplace, I recounted my find to my wife. She listened intently, her expression turning serious. "You shouldn't have touched anything out there," she warned. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just an old tree. That night I was awakened by a soft whispering sound. At first I thought it was my wife talking in her sleep, but when I turned to her I saw she was still asleep. The whispering grew louder, echoing around the cabin. I was frozen with fear, unsure of what to do. It felt as though the very walls were closing in on me. I tried to shake off the sensation, convincing myself it was just my imagination. But as I lay there, the whispering transformed into distinct words. "Leave this place." My heart raced and I bolted upright. I glanced at my wife, who remained undisturbed. I grabbed my phone and switched on the flashlight, illuminating the room. To my horror, the shadows cast by the light flickered and shifted unnaturally, as if something was lurking just beyond my sight. In a panic, I decided to go outside for some fresh air. The night was still, the moon casting an eerie glow over the trees. As I stepped onto the porch, I felt a sudden rush of cold air that made me shiver. I heard rustling in the bushes nearby and turned to see a dark figure darting away. My heart raced as I called out, but there was no response. Frightened, I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. I shook my wife awake, explaining what had happened. She looked at me with concern, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. "Maybe you just had a bad dream," she suggested, but I knew it was real. The rest of the night passed in uneasy silence. The whispering returned, haunting my thoughts, and sleep eluded me. By dawn, I was exhausted and shaken. We packed our bags and left the cabin, eager to escape the unsettling experience. As we drove away, I couldn't help but glance back at the cabin, a sense of foreboding washing over me. I realized that some places hold secrets that are better left undisturbed. This took place in 2017 and is 100% true. Due to a recent death of a close friend, I was unbearably depressed. My family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became clear that it was the off-season. Late November, cold weather, and the island was nearly empty, save for locals and a few straggling tourists like us. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island. We checked into a motel, though that word hardly does it justice. I call it a motel because all the room doors exit to the outside. But in actuality, our room was one of 20 or 30 quaint guest house-like buildings arranged in a horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The motel's entrance was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked straight ahead, you'd reach our room on the corner before needing to turn right to go further into the horseshoe. Stay with me. After a day of exploring and finishing dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a good distance from the mainland, and let me tell you, it gets dark. The darkness matched my mental state after dinner. Our conversation took a left turn, and my overwhelming depression took over. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to our hotel room, telling them I just needed to sleep. And I did, immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I lost consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom whispering my name harshly. The room had 2 beds, my parents' bed closer to the door and mine further in. My mom's voice cut through the silence again, sounding concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. I rolled over, my eyes adjusting to the dim moonlight streaming through the curtains. I saw her turn to face me, her eyes widening in surprise to find me in my bed. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she had been looking to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. I know this sounds like a setup for something creepy, but understand how horrifying it is to wake up in the middle of the ocean to find a hooded stranger looming over you. This moment seemed to last forever. Life isn't like the movies where characters unleash blood-curdling screams. Sometimes, the only thing that comes out is something panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low and severe as she called my dad's name in a dire voice I'd never heard before. The hooded figure did something bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards the bed, but instead raised its arms and held them high above its head, like a child playing, "Look at me." This made no sense at all. My mom's fear intensified, and she continued to call my dad's name, demanding that he wake up. After a moment, he finally stirred and sat up. When he did, the figure suddenly vanished, just gone. I turned to my mom, who was staring at the space where the figure had been. She looked back at me, both of us confused, and then I heard my dad ask, "What's going on?" My mom explained what had just happened, and even I couldn't help but get a little freaked out. My mom had never seen a ghost before, and I had only read stories. The energy in the room shifted. It felt heavier. We stayed awake the rest of the night, talking, unable to sleep after that bizarre experience. The next morning, my parents insisted we leave the island and head back to LA early. I didn't want to go, but my mom made an excuse about how we'd enjoyed enough time there. I don't blame her. I wouldn't want to be in a place where I had just experienced something so terrifying. To this day, I wonder if that figure was connected to my recent loss, or if it was just a random spirit in that area. My sister used to share a room with me when we were younger, and I often experienced sleep paralysis. One night I woke up in a cold sweat and saw a shadowy figure sitting at the foot of my bed. I couldn't move or speak, and all I could do was watch as the figure seemed to watch me back. After a few terrifying moments, it simply faded away, and I was able to move again. When I finally told my sister about this, she laughed it off and said it was just a dream. I didn't believe her and thought she would understand because she had also seen strange things. However, she assured me she had never experienced anything like that. As the years passed, we moved into separate rooms, and the incidents became less frequent for both of us. But every now and then, we would hear stories from our parents about things that happened in the house, whispers in the night, or things going missing only to reappear in odd places. We would both laugh nervously and dismiss them as old tales. It wasn't until I was in college that I found out the truth about our house. It was built on land that had a dark history. There had been a family tragedy decades before, and I can't help but wonder if the shadows from my childhood were connected to that history. My wife and I were on an emergency trip out to Mississippi to help get my mom into a nursing home. I don't have a license to drive, so my wife had to drive the whole way. Around 3 a.m., we reached a stretch of road that, as far as I could tell, was flanked by empty fields on both sides. It was unsettling, especially in the pitch black with no streetlights. I noticed my wife wasn't acting quite right. Her breathing seemed off, and her posture was a bit different. It was little stuff, but you notice those things when you're married. I asked, "Honey, do you need to take a break?" She replied, "Oh, no, I'm fine. Let's just finish this stretch, and we can find a hotel." I trusted her judgment, and we made it across, eventually hitting the hay at a Days Inn somewhere. The next morning, as we were brushing our teeth, I commented on how creepy that stretch of road was. She got quiet and said, "I honestly thought I dreamt that." I remember it not feeling real and me feeling like it was a dream. I told her I'd asked if she needed a break, and she said, "Yeah, I remember that too." And I thought, I dreamt it. Do me a favor, and if I ever tell you I'm fine and don't need a break, after driving 4 hours in pitch darkness again, don't take no for an answer, she added. I was so out of it I didn't realize how gone I was. We now have a standing agreement to stop each other well before then. The idea that she was fully disassociated in that moment and had a less than healthy grasp on reality always sends shivers down my spine. I hate to think of all the moments that could have gone wrong. Remember, exhausted driving is just as dangerous as drunk driving. This isn't my story, but my mom's. Her friend called her, slightly hysterical, saying her house was haunted. My mom, being a scientist, was very skeptical, but agreed to check it out. The friend was adamant that either her house was haunted or she was going crazy, and she needed help. When my mom arrived at her friend's house, she began showing her what she had seen. First, in the living room, there was a brass lamp that was shiny enough to reflect the kitchen behind it. She asked my mom to watch the reflection in the lamp. My mother saw a shadowy man step out from behind the wall. When she turned around, there was no one there. This phenomenon repeated itself several times. Next, they went into the friend's son's room, turned off the lights, and closed the door, but left the hallway light on. Looking at the strip of light under the door, my mom clearly saw the shadow of 2 feet step in front of it. They opened the door, but once again, there was no one there. This phenomenon also repeated itself several times. Lastly, they laid in the friend's bed. My mom fluffed up the comforter, which fell on top of their legs, creating clear indentations as if someone were sitting on it. They fluffed the comforter again, and it happened once more. All of these events repeated whenever my mom looked at them. She insisted she really tried to investigate, but she couldn't find any other explanation. Soon after, the friend consulted a medium or psychic who told her it was her furniture that was haunted, not the house itself. The furniture had been purchased secondhand at a garage sale. She got rid of it, and all the paranormal occurrences stopped. I lived in a 1940s concrete duplex for a year, and ever since I moved in, things always feel a bit tense once the sun goes down. Occasionally, I notice things moved around when I leave a room and return. Sometimes, when I'm up late, working on my computer, I see white figures in my peripheral vision, always in the same spot in the room. Once, I had a sleep paralysis episode where I saw one clearly zoom across the room toward me. I think I just woke up. My bedroom door faces a small hallway, and I've always made it a point to face my bed and not look away until the door is closed behind me. I don't know why I started doing this. It feels like instinct. Just a few minutes ago, around 11:40 p.m., I got hungry and went to the kitchen. When I returned to my room, I don't know why, but as I closed the door, I glanced back into the hallway and saw something I can only compare to a mix of SCP-1471 and No Face from Spirited Away. It had a white mask-like face and was slightly taller than me. I don't think I saw a body. Now, as I type this on my computer, I feel like a kid caught in the principal's office. I keep looking away at that spot in my room where the white figure likes to appear because it feels like someone is standing next to me. I keep seeing a white blur out of the corner of my eye, like someone waving a sheet. As I typed that last sentence, I had to freeze because it felt like someone put their hand on my shoulder for a few seconds. I don't know what to do. I hope someone sees this soon. I work in a hospital, and I think I saw a ghost. I was wheeling a trolley of paperwork down the hallway when I saw a woman standing there. There was no one else around, which is rare. The moment I noticed her, goosebumps covered my arms. She stood still, not looking lost, but gazing at a wall. We made eye contact as I walked past her, and I felt a strange heat leaving my body, the best way I can describe it. Behind me, I heard the sound of shuffling and turned back to see her moving slowly to follow me. I told myself I would ask her if she was okay, after dropping off the paperwork in the office just around the corner from where I saw her. Here's the thing. I came back out of the office 30 seconds later, and she was gone. There was no way she could have disappeared so quickly, especially considering how slowly she was moving. I saw a nurse in the corridor on my way back and asked her if she had seen the woman. She said no, and hadn't seen anyone matching the description. The corridor felt warmer as I returned, and I haven't seen that woman since. My coworkers think I imagined her, but the goosebumps and that cold sinking feeling during our eye contact were real. I would expect a hospital to be the place for a ghost sighting. I've worked there for a year, but this was my first experience that made me think, was that really a ghost? I can't explain it, and it still spooks me.